Hi and welcome to Dirtbike's Versus video series. Today we have two KTM 300s. The debate between followers of KTM's PDS and linkage rear suspension systems has raged on for years. The sides are so clearly divided that KTM's official stance is to stay out of it. Both systems are currently offered. These two bikes here, the KTM 300XC and the KTM 300XC-W, are perfect examples. It can cause some confusion. This is ground zero for the schism. Which is which? Which is for what? Up front, the two bikes seem very similar. They have the most successful motor in KTM history, the 300cc two-stroke. Both have transfer port oil injection and 6-speed transmissions. According to KTM's overall plan, bikes in the XC line are viewed as cross-country racers. Those with the W suffix are more trail-oriented. That doesn't stop anyone from lining up with W models and Enduros or play riding with the XC. Here's the short form of the tech differences between the two. First and foremost, PDS rear suspension without linkage is used on the W. That means the WP Xplor shock is bolted directly to the swing arm. The spring is progressive and has dual rates of 60 and 66 Newton meters. The frame and swing arm are designed specifically to accommodate this system. On the XC, linkage is used to connect the Xact 5750 shock to the swing arm. A straight rate spring of 42 Newton meters is used. The W uses a WP Xplor fork with a 4.1 Newton meter coil steel spring. The XC uses an Xact 5448 air fork without springs. Standard air pressure is 139 psi or 9.6 bar. First and second gears are taller on the XC than on the XC.W. The final gearing on the XC is 1351, whereas the W is 1350. Ignition mapping is slightly different on the two bikes too. Both have a secondary map pre-programmed into the ECU, but it can't be accessed without buying the optional handlebar-mounted switch. The W comes with a headlight, a taillight, and an odometer. The fuel tanks have slightly different capacities, 2.4 gallons on the XC.W, 2.25 on the XC. Interestingly enough, the two bikes are almost identical in weight. On our scale with empty fuel tanks, the XC weighs 226 pounds and the XC.W is 227. The weight saved by doing away with the linkage is canceled by having coil steel springs and lights. Also, the prices are identical, $10,499. The motors have the same cases, porting, electric starter, and DDS clutches. Both have Dunlop AT81 tires, Excel rims, Niken handlebars, Brembo brakes, and Brembo hydraulic clutches. The grips are ODI bolt-ons, the chains are RKs, and virtually all of the parts are top-notch. Before comparing them, you gotta know up front that both are pure magic. Setting aside the suspension, the main point is still indisputable. When it comes to riding difficult off-road terrain, there's nothing better than a modern 300cc two-stroke. They're virtually unstoppable at low RPM, where a four-stroke, any four-stroke, will eventually get to the point where it simply quits running at low revs. These two bikes will always continue as long as you keep the throttle open at least a little. When the era of TPS fuel injection arrived, KTM's 300s seemed to become a little more docile. The power became more linear, and many people complained. In terms of measurable power output, there wasn't any real change. but there was a slight increase in weight. Interestingly enough, we've heard rumors that there's a new generation of fuel-injected two-strokes coming from KTM, one that will do away with transfer port injection and oil injection. We'll have to wait and see. When you ride these two bikes back to back, it's clear that there's a difference in power delivery, but not a big one. The W seems to come on the pipe a little earlier and sign off sooner. The difference in suspension is, of course, much greater. The W loves rocks, it loves roots, it loves trail junk. The bike is quite clearly designed for low-speed riding. It's softer and more responsive. Whenever there's a faster section where the conditions aren't as severe, the W, on the other hand, is bouncy and soft. The fork in particular will dive when slowing from speed and make the whole package seem less stable. In back-to-back rides, we find that the XC thrives on this type of terrain. It's much more stable at speed and wallows less in big whoops. In truth, this is all about the setup choices that KTM made when selecting the spring rates and damping characteristics of the two bikes. The XC.W is far softer. Plus, the differences in the Xplor and the Xact forks go way beyond steel springs versus air pressure. They're completely different. The Xact fork is more sophisticated with a more or less conventional base valve system. The Xplor fork doesn't have a base valve dedicated to compression damping, meaning that when you turn that clicker on top of the left leg to stiffen things up, it's actually affecting the mid valve. The Xplor fork is, however, a perfect match for the bike's intended purpose of tight, twisty trails in first or second gear. As for PDS suspension, it's aimed at the exact same terrain as the Xplor fork. It's soft, comfy, and cushy. As speed increases, it's more out of its element. The linkage suspension on the XC came straight from the motocross world, so it's a little harsh in rocks, but perfectly natural at high speeds. The XC's linkage hangs down about 3 inches directly in front of the rear wheel. That's a disaster when it comes to getting over big logs and rocks. The bike stops cold and leaves the tire spinning in empty air. The rear tire of the PDS bike will grab traction and send you on your way. In this one category, there's really no contest. The PDS bike is an easy winner in extreme terrain. But do we have a clear overall winner? No, of course not. The bikes have different purposes for different riders. We will point out, however, that the overlap is huge. In this area of limited supply, it's wise to get what's available rather than what's perfect. You can easily modify the suspension on either bike to work in your world. In either case, you'll have one of the greatest off-road bikes ever made. You can look for the full story in the January 2022 print issue of Dirtbike magazine. And as always, you can go to dirtbikemagazine.com for all the latest in racing and off-road info. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.